honor to have all of you here.
Maybe I should have promoted this. How you doing? I had a whole nother video planned, but yeah. Wait for a few to get in here. Big announcement today. I had a whole nother video planned. Let me know who's in the comments, please, and thank you. I'm gonna try to do this audio and tell me if you can hear it, because I don't know what's wrong. Can you guys hear me? First of all, what's up, D? Can you hear me? Am I coming through the audio? Okay. I'm going to play this video. Tell me if you can hear this.
On January 3rd, 2009, Satoshi released Bitcoin. The world was forever changed, but almost no one realized it. A handful of pioneers took...
Thank you, Damon. We're going to watch this whole thing together, guys. Do a live today. This is big news. Big news. Damon, thanks for coming in, man. You at work right now, buddy? Let me tell some people I'm live. I haven't even announced this. Okay. Which Walmart? You in Henderson? You don't one of the ones on Eastern? I think there's two on Eastern, isn't it? Nice. Sunset. Okay. Yeah, I know exactly what it is. I was there the other day. My friend. I appreciate your support, man. Seriously. All right, we're going to watch this together. Fast forward some of the parts, but this is big news. Again, I had a whole nother video planned, and I was like, "What? Bitcoin for America, the Bitcoin Policy Institute." Love it, man. Me too, man. Thanks. I love all the Bitcoiners, man, and I love that you come into the streams, man. You're helping me out, bro, because I don't have a lot of viewers here in the lives. Did you watch my video yesterday? Send this to. Yep, I was. Thanks for watching that, man. I appreciate it. Hey, Paul, how you doing, man? How's it going, my friend? I had a whole nother video planned, and I see you, Damon. And I seen this here, the Bitcoin for America. So I'm going to go ahead and start playing it, and then we're gonna react to it. Tell me if you can hear it or you can't hear it or whatever.
Of the Bitcoin, and it is a true all of you here. On January 3rd, 2009, Satoshi released Bitcoin. The world was forever changed, but almost no one realized it. A handful of pioneers took up the task of explaining Bitcoin, how it worked, and why it would make the world a better, freer, fairer place. These advocates were largely met with derision, but they continued their work undeterred. Fast forward to today, 16 years later, tens of millions of users participate in Bitcoin's network, and it is the 9th largest asset in the world. Its supporters, once relegated to email lists and internet forums, are now on Main Street, Wall Street, and as of Thursday, the Oval Office. When the history of this decade is written, last Thursday's executive order will mark a turning point. The president established a strategic Bitcoin reserve and announced a policy to maximize Bitcoin's strategic position as a unique store of value in the global financial system. This would have been impossible without countless individuals, many of you in this room, taking the time to discuss, understand, and ultimately champion Bitcoin. Our goal for today is to continue this process, to help people understand how Bitcoin benefits America and the world writ large. To that end, we've gathered Bitcoin developers, investors, advocates, and industry executives alongside government officials, policy experts, and civil servants here in our nation's capital to build on Thursday's momentum and chart a course for an America strengthened by Bitcoin. Thank you all for being here, and I'm very, very excited for our next speaker, the original Bitcoin senator, Senator Cynthia Lummis.
This is big, guys. This is huge. Glad to see you're doing well, Paul. Good to see you, brother. Yes. What's the price rate?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I should have walked around here sooner. I didn't realize how many people were here. This is a fabulous turnout. And I'm so excited to be here because I get to do something I never get to do, is being an honorary co-host, which means other people do all the work and I just get to come and enjoy. And enjoy is right, because this room really is filled with the leaders in this business, in this industry, people who got it before other people could see what was about to come. And now your vision from these past years is coming into full fruit and flower here in the United States. And it was truly a coincidence that President Trump's executive order and the announcements of last week at the White House coincided with today's pre-planned event. So congrats to the Bitcoin Policy Institute and to all of you for your prescient work in putting this together. We have votes today at like 11:30, and my staff says, "Oh, you can make your remarks and then come back to vote." And I said, "Heck no, I want to stay all morning because I get to sit and listen to you, the experts in this industry." So I'm here this morning to greet you and hopefully, John, and inspire you for what you're doing, because the innovation and the vision and the excitement and the knowledge base is in this room. And there's so much to share with other people that we have a lot of work ahead of us. But the real contributors, the real sharp minds, the leaders, the innovators are here so we can work together to make this happen. I'm so pleased to announce that today I will be reintroducing the Bitcoin Act.
What's up, Scorpion?
And I'll be joined here shortly by Senator Justice of West Virginia, who is one of the co-sponsors. And we have several other additional co-sponsors. And a lot of it is a result of the excitement that's been building, both among you and at the White House. And so we intend to make a real push for helping people understand this asset class. You know, there are still people who don't know the difference between Bitcoin and other digital assets. I was listening, I was homesick with pneumonia last week, and so I could barely lift my head off the pillow. But I was listening to Fox Business, and one of their on-screen talents, a gal that has some pretty good knowledge about digital assets, was talking about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. And one of her co-hosts said, "What is a Bitcoin?" And so I'm waiting to hear what she had to say. And she gave an absolutely perfect definition of the Ethereum blockchain. So there's still a lot of confusion out there about why Bitcoin is so unique, why it is digital gold, why it is a strategic asset, why it is freedom money, why it brings other countries into a system that allows individual freedom as well as freedom from governments that have hyperinflation or corruption. I mean, this asset is a game changer for the whole world. So for America, the leader in financial innovation, to have sat on the sidelines for as long as we have is unusual for us. And that's why I'm so proud of President Trump and his team for taking us off the sidelines and putting us in the arena of global policymaking and making sure the innovations that happen here. And he has pledged that he wants America to be the place that is the repository of the knowledge base, the mining, the entire gamut of financial services associated with Bitcoin. And he realizes that a strategic asset that has the durability, the quality, the completely 100% decentralized nature of a scarce asset like Bitcoin is absolutely unique in the world in the 21st century. And the talent to harness those capabilities, those qualities of Bitcoin, and make them available throughout the world and here in the United States as well to people who are either unbanked or underbanked. And in the scary case of Choke Point 2.0, debanked Americans. I mean, who could have ever thought that could happen in this country? That banks would take customers off their balance sheets because they're afraid of the business you're innovating? That's about the most un-American thing I can imagine. Hopefully those days are over, and we're doing everything we can to make sure they are. That's un-American. We're not going back. We're going to make sure this asset and other assets in digital format become the product that the world looks to. This becomes the product that helps America remain the world's reserve currency and that brings about innovations that make money faster and cheaper and better available, regardless of where you live in the world, regardless of your circumstance. This really is freedom money. And America should lead when it comes to freedom money. Oh. So I'm just looking forward to being here today and being the little fly on the wall that gets to listen to all the expertise in this room. I want to thank you so much for what you're doing for this industry in America and for sharing your knowledge base with those of us in Congress who don't have your vision, don't have your knowledge, but want to harness it and make it available so you have a clear legislative framework that gives you the ability to innovate and be free and make this asset everything that it can be, everything that it was designed to be. So God bless you all, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And now I think I get to introduce Senator Jim Justice, don't I?
Paul, thank you again, man. Dude, you're killing me, man. Paul just sent in another 100,000 sats. My gosh. And the troll 683 says, Jerry rotund body is blocking most of the video. We can't see the lady talking. Okay. I think I'm in a little square. The troll. I just want to thank you so much. God bless you, Jerry. I want to thank you, Paul, and you're welcome. And thank you so much. Make sure you consolidate. Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. The cholesterol is killing you, not Paul. Okay.
Well, this is my notes.
I got you,
So,
Paul. I got you, Paul. Thank
Let
you.
me just say just this. I can't be more honored to be here for sure. But just to think, the Crypto Summit, Bitcoin Act, it's really unbelievable what we have right at our fingertips. That's all there is to it. Now, I got a lot of gray hair, and really and truly, Senator Lummis is a superstar beyond belief. We have our president behind the movement right now. We have this great senator behind this movement right now. Now's our time. Now's our time to really do something. Now, with that being said, I think just about just this. The whole world awaits. I always call the voters Toby and Edith. Now, I'm a plain-spoken guy, okay? There's nothing fancy about me, but I've done a lot of stuff. Now, and with all that being said, I'm a real believer, and I'm really, really proud to join the team today. But some way, somehow, we've got to reach Toby and Edith. We've got to educate. We've got to do so much because right at our fingertips, there's so much opportunity, it's off the chart. You know, I think about, and I know you've heard this 10 million times, but really, if you just explained and said, there was a time we went from a horse to an automobile. We went from an automobile to a flying machine. Then all of a sudden we ended up on the moon, and now we're going to Mars. But in the financial world,
What's up, Zach?
we've got to do the same thing. We have to do the same thing. And right now, we all know is our time, our opportunity.
No problem, Paul. Thank you.
Like I said many, many times, I'm a business guy. I'm a real believer. I want to be on the team. I absolutely think I can bring a lot to the table. But with all that being said, I've got to say just this. We have so much of an opportunity right now, right at our fingertips. Of all things, I would say to each and every one of you, just this today, and just keep this in your mind. I'm a coach. I've coached forever. I still coach. I love kids. But you know what my ball team would do right now? My ball team would all be together and they would scream, "Let's go," right now. That's what all of us should do. Let's go, because now is our time. Right now is our time. The opportunity to do stuff to perpetuate this nation beyond belief.
Sending love back to you, Paul.
That we become
Thank you, Paul. I love you, brother.
The center of the universe as far as the financial world. That's what we want to do. American needs to lead the way. So it's really, 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 it touches my heart in a big way. My dad would have always said, dream big, son. Dream really big. We came from really humble beginnings. But my dad would have said, dream big. And my ball team would say, let's go. God bless you. Thank you so much.
Guys, this is huge. This is huge, man. What's going on here? This is historic.
No, I'll stay right here. Where do you want me to stay?
Right.
Michael Saylor's coming up. Michael Saylor.
Absolutely.
Now we're talking.
The troll, Michael
So
Saylor.
it is my privilege to introduce the next speaker, Michael Saylor. Now, Michael Saylor, as we all know, is truly an original visionary. He could see what was coming before so many of us, and he made this a pivotal investment strategy that has just turned to digital gold left and right. He has articulated the qualities of Bitcoin in particular in every remark he gives, and he
Gotcha,
helps
Paul.
people understand what it really means to be fully decentralized, fully scarce, fully durable, and all of the other assets that make Bitcoin digital gold. He's just one of the true leaders in Bitcoin policy. He has helped me understand this asset and provided me with tools and mechanisms to help educate my fellow
Paul gave me
senators.
100,000
And we'll be using
sats.
those,
He's the
Michael,
boss
as
today.
the days and
I
months
got to do what he says.
come forward here, and Senator Justice and I have the opportunity to share the knowledge that you have shared with us. Please welcome Michael Saylor.
I'm delighted to have the opportunity to speak today. The word strategic Bitcoin reserve to the casual observer sound like a stockpile of an asset. To a closer observer, it sounds like a stockpile of the most valuable asset the human race has ever invented. But I'm here today to show you how the strategic Bitcoin reserve represents a strategy for United States digital supremacy in the 21st century. The president, with his vision, has established a strategic Bitcoin reserve as of last week and has declared that America will be the Bitcoin superpower. That is prescient. I would hazard to guess that the great majority of the people that saw that post don't even know what Bitcoin superpower means, and they haven't really considered it. I was inspired by the words, and that caused me to put together this presentation
Good,
today.
Paul. Don't worry about it, brother.
Why is Bitcoin critical to the prosperity of the United States in the 21st century? That is the question we all should be asking. There are many metaphors for thinking about a strategic reserve of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital capital. If we thought of it as Bitcoin as digital capital, is this a stockpile of cheese? Is this a stockpile of oil, natural gas, or even uranium, all of which would be interesting? Well, at its worst case, and in its narrowest form, you could think about the strategic Bitcoin reserve as a stockpile of the apex asset of the human race. And so what's it worth? Well, over the next 20 years, I think it's worth anywhere from $3 trillion to $106 trillion to the United States. U.S. corporations, like my corporation, are actually recapitalizing on Bitcoin. We've gone from having $250 million of assets 48 months ago to having nearly $45 billion of assets in 48 months. If you look out over the next 20 years, corporations that are accumulating Bitcoin on their reserve, like MSTR, like Mara, like Riot, they're going to have $20 to $40 trillion. So this is a small metaphor, but it's a powerful metaphor. But, you know, it's hard to rent out or finance or develop your cheese or your gold or your natural gas buried in a vault. So a more powerful metaphor is Bitcoin is digital property. If you own 5% of Manhattan and your family owned it for 100 years and someone said, how are you going to pay your bills? You wouldn't say, we're just going to sell it. You would say, we're going to rent it. We're going to develop it. We're going to put a building on top of it, a business on top of it, or we're going to finance it. We're going to borrow against it. The same is true with Bitcoin. In 20 years, the United States could be generating $10 trillion per year by renting, developing, or financing the assets in that strategic Bitcoin reserve. The AIs are coming. The AIs don't get bank accounts. They don't get credit cards. The AIs, the artificial intelligence economy, will be built on digital capital, digital property. It'll be a $100 trillion economy. It'll be built on Bitcoin. Well, a lot of people, they think of it as an asset. You think of it as a property, but what we know to be true is that Bitcoin is actually a network, and it's not just any network. It's not an information network. It's an energy network. It's a conservative network. I can send $1 billion from me to you. I lose it. You have it. That is the conservation of energy in cyberspace. So when you start to visualize Bitcoin as a digital energy network, what you realize is that trillions of dollars of digital commerce will flow over that network. The banking system of the world is going to rebuild itself on a digital energy network. We're going to have 40,000 banks that'll be settling with each other in real time. Finally, moving billions, tens of billions, or hundreds of billions of dollars an hour over a pure digital network. right? So if you look at look at the world and imagine digital
Wow, I
energy
didn't know
moving
that.
around the world, and then you ask the question, would you want to own it or would you want to ignore it? It's an important question. And of course, you know, I think some of you might have seen the cyber blackout of X yesterday and all the cyber attacks. The last and most important metaphor is when we have open digital energy flowing, it is a commerce network.
That's right, Paul.
But when we reverse that digital energy into a shield, it becomes a defense system. Bitcoin's a digital defense system. Bitcoin messages, data authentications, transactions, they're unstoppable, uncorruptible, immutable, immune to tampering by any known cyber threat. You can protect the United States commercial and
Exactly, Paul.
military and financial systems behind a wall of digital energy. And that's exactly how we will do it. You know, even Elon Musk pointed out, the AIs don't know how to hack Bitcoin. They can spoof you out of your money. They can convince you that they're someone they're not. There's no way to trick an 800 exahash digital wall that's based on modern encryption. The AIs won't get through that wall. What's driving the growth of Bitcoin? It is the most powerful force in the world right now. It's growing nearly 60%. It's become the eighth largest asset in the world. It's about to become the largest asset in the world in the next 48 months. What is it? It's all of the smart money in the world running from risk, running from the past toward the future, from something less secure to something more secure. And they're doing it in the most visible way with their capital. This is a map of the wealth distribution in the world, about $900 trillion. If you break it into uses, half of it is just a store of value. We're long-term, we're preserving our capital for the long term. We just want to keep our money. The other half are assets held for utility. I want to do something with the asset. If you drill into the 450 trillion, you realize the problem is that long-term capital is being dissipated and decimated by fires, by floods, by famines, by terrors, by
Paul,
wars, by competition, by rust, by obsolescence, by torts, by traffic, you name it, right? What's that cost? That costs 10 trillion a year. There's people go, well, what is Bitcoin's use case? The use case is to not suffer $10 trillion a year of damage from entropy, from inflation, from chaos, from the future. Bitcoin's an asset without the financial risk of a currency, a bond, a stock, and it doesn't have the physical risk of real estate and property. And we're stripping away the counterparty risk to everything. And so we're moving away from risk. And what that means is that as the word spreads that there's an opportunity to keep your money without taking risk, long-term capital is being merged into the Bitcoin network. The greatest digital transformation of the 21st century, it isn't the transformation of music. It isn't the transformation of your photos, your communications, your Facebook friends, or educational videos, although each of those things made $1 trillion company. The greatest digital transformation is the transformation of capital. So it's the transformation of 450 trillion. What's it worth? It's worth half of everything. It's half of everything. That's the transformation. Digital capital is stronger, faster, and smarter capital. It's everything you don't like about the building stripped away, and you've got an invisible, indestructible, immortal, teleportable building. It's a better building. It's global capital. It's everybody that's living in Asia and Africa and South America would move to the U.S. if they could. They'd move their money to the U.S. if they could. They want the currency of the U.S. They want the property of the U.S. They want the security of the U.S. They want the values of the U.S. But they can't have it. So the second best thing they can have is move their money into the Bitcoin network, which has all of the values, protections, and security of the U.S. Bitcoin is immortal capital. Right? You can keep your money for 1,000 years. A 10 basis point fee works out to a useful lifetime of 1,000 years. All the other long-term capital assets have a life of 10 to 100 years. Find a business you want to invest in that'll be around for 500 years. Find a building that will last for 500 years. Find a bond that will pay off in 500 years. Find a piece of art that'll still be legible in 500 years. And finally, what we all know in this room is that Bitcoin is, and digital capital is ethical capital. It's the only thing in this world you can truly own. If you have possession of the keys, if you have possession of the knowledge of where the keys might be, you own the thing. No one can take the thing away from you. Everything else you have in this world, you own at the pleasure of someone more powerful than you until they decide to take it away from you. Satoshi gave us property rights. sound money, sovereign money. It's a network, but what is it? It's the world's most powerful network. 800 exahash. What's the measure of digital power? It's exahash. 20 gigawatts, all the electricity, all the power that fires up the US Navy. It's also got the most economic power. My company spent $33 billion
That's right, Paul.
to
100%.
buy 2.4% of the network. Do the math in your head, you'll realize there's $1 trillion of real money that has flowed into this network, and there's $1 trillion of smart money behind it. It's the world's most global, fault-tolerant, unstoppable network. Each of those ASIC chips is hundreds of thousands of laptop computers. You'd need trillions and trillions of computers to dent this network. And then, of course, many people say, oh, I get it. It's a network effect. It must be a network. Yeah. Well, it's not a Metcalfean network. That's just enough information about networks to hurt yourself. It's not getting more powerful with the square of the number of nodes. It's getting more powerful based upon the amount of mass, energy, and capital flowing in the network. It's a Newtonian network, like the solar system. When the white dwarf comes past your planet, it's going to suck the atmosphere off your planet. A white dwarf is not the same as an asteroid the same size. They're different. Bitcoin is the brightest thing in the financial universe, right? Heat and light. It's the most interesting. It's growing stronger. It's growing hotter. It's growing denser as it draws the capital of the world into its orbit. What capital? Physical capital. People are selling their buildings. Financial capital. They're going to trade out their low-grade bonds, their currencies in third world and in the second world. Foreign capital. They're going to sell their Siberian real warehouses and their Russian natural gas rights. It's drawing antiquated capital, the capital of the 20th century. It's drawing smart capital. Anybody that thought about it and thought, do I want to be invested in something that's going to decay or be destroyed over time by 100 uncertain risks? Or do I want to just keep my money in cyberspace? And then digital capital, right? The AIs, they don't get the bank account. As the economy digitizes, people want to move digital money at the speed of light with a million transactions a second. You're not doing it with a Siberian warehouse. You're not doing it with natural gas or gold. You're not going to do it with any 20th century asset. Where is it headed? Well, there's an open source model. You can download it on GitHub called Bitcoin 24. Plug in your own assumptions. Our assumptions,
That's
well,
right,
Bitcoin's
Zach.
currently 22 basis points of the global economy. That's $2 trillion. Over 20 years, right now it's been growing about 60% a year. If it decelerates from 60% a year to 20% a year, the average return is going to be 29% a year over the 20 years. That is the base case. That arrives at a price of $13 million of Bitcoin in USD terms, or $280 trillion in the network. Does the world turn upside down? No. What happens? Well, everything pretty much stays the same, except for those that embrace Bitcoin get rich and powerful. Those that don't embrace Bitcoin get weaker and poorer. Otherwise, everything that you see in the world today will still be there in the world in 20 years. Bitcoin is not a threat to the dollar. The dollar is currency. Bitcoin is capital. In the modern world, there are plenty of academic economists. They will just recite ad infinitum. Well, money is a store of value, a medium of exchange, a unit of account. There, I told you. And they just haven't really thought about that past just rote memory. This is why you shouldn't rote memorize stuff in education. Think a little bit harder about what's going on here. If you need money for the next 4 weeks in Argentina, then you're using the peso. If you need money for the next 4 years in Argentina, you're using the dollar. If you need money for the next 40 years in Argentina and you're smart, you're using the coin. And so the dollar is competing, but is competing against the M2 money supply of the CNY, Chinese currency, European currency, Japanese currency.
Love you too, Paul. Thank you.
Right now, we're about 17% of that. We should be able to grow to 30% of that. How? With digital currency. If U.S. banks and U.S. corporations can issue digital currencies backed by the U.S. Treasury, we will expand that supply of U.S. currency by $10 trillion, right? That's a digital asset strategy. That's why the stablecoin bill and the Genius Act matter. It is not capital. Bitcoin is less than 1% of the capital of the world. What does it compete with? Not the dollar. Bitcoin competes with property, equity, and bonds. Property, equity, and bonds. And what is it? It's 1%. And what is it going to? I just showed you the shocker $13 million Bitcoin forecast. That gets us to 13% of the capital in 2045. We have two strategies. expand our currency to dominate the world with the digital currency of choice, expand our capital to dominate the world with the digital capital of choice. Why should the US want to be the Bitcoin superpower? You cannot remain a sovereign nation if you lose control of your airspace, outer space, or cyberspace. This is a truism. It's pretty important. We're not talking about making a little bit of money here. We're talking about defending the American way of life. A superpower has to keep the air routes open. You must be able to fly, not just fly from here to London. You need to be able to fly from New York to Chicago. If you look at what happened in the first Gulf War, we took control of Iraqi airspace. Within a week, their entire country was non-functioning. Some people would say within 48 hours, they were non-functioning. This country won't function for 48 hours after we lose control of our airspace. How do we protect it? We have Air Force bases. We have military aircraft. This is evolving. It will continue to evolve. Drones, very sophisticated defense systems. We have to keep open our sea lanes. This is a truism for 1,000 years. The Carthaginians knew it. That's why the Romans destroyed them. The Carthaginians had destroyed the Venetian fleet. Every single port in the Mediterranean that was a Venetian port was also a Roman port, was also a Carthaginian port, was also a Phoenician port. Why? Because you must keep the sea lanes open if you would be a superpower. If I cut off your sea lanes, I choke your economy. The Japanese determined this or found this out in World War II. Sea power requires naval bases operating appropriate ships. A superpower has to keep its cyber channels open. What does that mean? It means your communication channels for digital information, but it also means your communication channels for digital energy. I need to be able to move a signal, but I need to move a $10 billion chunk of money. I don't just need to keep the cyber channels open around the world. It's not just I want to move that information or that energy between New York and Tokyo. If I lose control of cyberspace over the United States, I can't move information between New York and Chicago, right? You lose cyberspace, you'll lose your own digital economy. What would you do if your enemy got control of your cyberspace? You saw just, again, yesterday, you can't even log into X. Well, what happens when you can't log into your bank account? Cyber power requires Bitcoin miners operating ASICs, throwing up a wall of digital energy. And you want to hope that more than 50% of that is controlled by you or your allies. What does it mean to own cyberspace? If you want to be a Bitcoin superpower, you need to own the asset, own Bitcoin, but that's only half of it. Owning all of New York City and losing control of the sea lanes and the airspace above New York City is a Pyrrhic victory, right? You won't own it very long. It'll get shredded. You have to control the network, the cyber network, the digital energy network that flows around the world. AI is the future. The computers, the AIs, they're smarter than us. They're going to think faster than us. At some point, they'll be thinking 1,000,000 times a second, talking to each other, right? And if you want to build the greatest economy in the world, your cars need to drive themselves. The robots need to think. The factories need to think. And your agent needs to be thinking 1,000,000 times a second about how to do something useful for you. Digital intelligence requires digital energy, which has to be secured by digital power in order to engage in digital commerce. When I say digital commerce, I don't just mean buying trinkets on Amazon. I mean moving all of the money and securing all the assets of the world. I mean, 950 trillion going to 4,000 trillion dollars of assets. And it couldn't be clearer where that's headed right now. The unit of digital energy is the Satoshi. The unit of digital power is the exahash, right? What are the benefits to America of the Bitcoin strategy? Embrace Bitcoin. We own the 21st century. All the money, all the capital of the world is moving out of the 20th century. Everything that made sense, every educated financier was educated in the 20th century. They were taught a bunch of bromides, a bunch of rules. All of those rules probably made sense in the 20th century. The way we fought World War II is not the way we fight World War III. Every military doctrine, every financial doctrine, it might have been right at one point. It's not right any longer. Trillions of dollars of capital is going to flow from those physical and financial assets into digital, into the Bitcoin network. Okay, you might say, well, I'm making a strong assertion. Bitcoin is the digital capital network. I'm not just the one making that assertion. The president of the United States made that assertion last week, explained by David Sachs on Friday night. He said, Bitcoin is the only crypto asset that is truly decentralized. It is special. Maybe in the future, there might be some other digital capital. The US government doesn't recognize any other digital capital, nor do we. And that's because 99% of the power in the crypto ecosystem is in the Bitcoin network. If you want to own cyberspace and own the future, you need to own it. Embrace Bitcoin and strengthen the dollar. We have the chance to establish, own, and control the global digital capital network. That is Bitcoin. We can back the US dollar with Bitcoin reserves, the only monetary asset that is competitive to the dollar. If I need a liquid fungible asset to capitalize a company or an institution, it's not real estate, it's not natural gas, it's not art, it's not private and public equity portfolios, it's not even going to be an index of equity. The only asset that I can use other than Bitcoin is US treasuries everywhere in the world. If anybody ever decides to replace those, they'll replace them with Bitcoin. We should own both. Embrace Bitcoin, attract foreign capital. It's not just we're getting the 20th century money, we're getting the rest of the world's money. If I gave you money, if I took all your money, I dropped you in Africa and I said, you got to invest in a diversified portfolio of private and public equity and real estate or in Africa, or you can put your money into the digital capital network and move it anywhere else at the speed of light. And I gave you a choice to punch the orange button or leave it in Africa for 100 years. You would punch the orange button. Everybody else in the world's figuring out the same thing right now. That's why countries will make laws against it. That's why the Chinese have export controls on their capital. All of the capital will flow into the US. But if you can't physically come to the US, the next best thing is you flow into the digital capital network and you get all the protections of the US. And finally, you embrace Bitcoin, you empower Americans. It's American companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet. They're going to outlast, outperform, and outlive their competitors. So American institutions that are holding Bitcoin, they're going to enrich their shareholders. The beneficiaries are us. And the last point, with the appropriate digital assets framework, we can become the bankers to the world, right? When we export Bitcoin to the world, we're exporting our values: sovereignty, sound money, integrity, property rights. When we export digital currency, we're literally exporting our currency. If we create other digital securities or digital tokens, we'll be exporting our companies, our ideas, our securities, our financial products to the world. We can dominate this industry. So how should the US pursue a Bitcoin strategy? Well, Senator Lummis has given us a clear guideline with the Bitcoin Act in Nashville in July. And what the Bitcoin Act said, it said, let's acquire 1 million Bitcoin over a 5-year period in a programmatic, disciplined fashion, transparent to all. And so let's consider the consequences of this strategy. Well, first of all, last week, the president signed the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve Act or order. If we hold that 200,000 Bitcoin for the next 20 years, even though you see a flat line on the screen, the flat line is worth $3 trillion. So that's the value of doing nothing. Sometimes people think that you have to do something to make money. Sometimes the absence of doing awful and stupid things is making money. Doing stuff is highly overrated if the stuff is trading or selling your Bitcoin. The Lummis bill would acquire a million Bitcoin or 1.2 million Bitcoin. If you look at the consequences of that over the time frame, it's worth $16 trillion to the nation. If you get a bit more aggressive and we go to another million Bitcoin, it's worth $34 trillion to the nation. In this case, there's a bit of reflexivity. If the United States starts to more aggressively stockpile Bitcoin, it's going to accelerate the growth of the network. It's going to accelerate capial flowing in the network. It's going to increase and expand the overall digital capital network.
This is historic right here.
If we move to a triple max strategy, you'll end up with 4 million Bitcoin. That's worth $73 trillion to America. And of course, President Trump has laid out a guideline. We should be the superpower. If you want a superpower strategy, here's a superpower strategy. Acquire Bitcoin consistently. By the way, over what time frame? Consistently daily between now and the 0.99. 0.99 is January of the year 2035, the point at which 99% of the Bitcoin supply has been mined. The asset becomes effectively capped for all practical purposes, because the last 1% comes out over 100 years. 0.99 between now and then is you've got 10 years for the digital gold rush. You should get your Bitcoin before there's no more Bitcoin for you. And you can see here, in this strategy, we acquire it consistently, and then we use surpluses from the US government to continue to save in Bitcoin. It's worth $106 trillion to the United States. And so what does that look like? Well, the Lummis plan, which is grand, is modest in some ways, and a modest strategic Bitcoin reserve plan neutralizes the national debt. Sometimes doing modest things are actually brilliant as long as you do the thing. It's like the people that bought just a little bit of Bitcoin in 2012. It was a modest investment. It made them billionaires. A modest thing 20 years in advance is a brilliant thing. If you're more aggressive, the triple max plan negates the national debt. The superpower plan creates a global superpower. We bought 78% of the United States for $40 million. $40 million purchased nearly 80% of this country. Think about it for a second. Bitcoin is the greatest opportunity of the 21st century, right? It's worth anywhere from 3 trillion to 106 trillion, depending upon how programmatic and aggressive we want to pursue this opportunity. These opportunities don't come often. This is the once in a century opportunity. And as Donald Trump has said, never sell your Bitcoin. And I'll leave you with the final thought. What happens if we allow another nation to claim title to Bitcoin superpower? If we don't claim it, we give them control of the network world. We risk being impoverished and imperiled by a hostile nation that controls all the world's digital energy. You could have clung to your glass beads when the world went to the gold standard. You could have clung to your steam engines when the world went to internal combustion. You know, you could have kept your wood-burning stoves when Rockefeller offered you petroleum. We could have dismissed nuclear power. We once had another project. We had a Manhattan project. It was a large investment in nuclear energy. Do you want to control the world's digital energy? Because the digital economy will run on digital energy. The choice is ours, either prosperity or poverty in the 21st century. Bitcoin is manifest destiny for America. Thank you.
Wow. Michael Saylor, VW, absolutely right. Definitely a once in a century opportunity. And Zach, I hear you about Jason Lowry. I'm with you, man. This is incredible, man. Incredible. Historic. We got it. This is why Trump needed to win.
An American entrepreneur, a political commentator. Perhaps, I think a lot of us here agree. Next, Governor of Ohio, Vivek Ramaswamy.
My man Vivek. This is my guy right here.
As dressed up as I am. I like this. It's a nice audience. That's good to be here, and great to hear Michael's comments. I want to thank all of you for taking an interest in a subject that falls outside of the standard Washington talking point menu, at least as of now, but which is going to be highly relevant to our future. And frankly, I'm grateful to President Trump for being the first president in modern history that has taken a serious interest in the future of really all of the sectors in the future, but including Bitcoin and the future of related crypto policies. And I think that part of the golden age for America will be a golden age of not just Bitcoin, but thoughtfulness, our approach to the future of Bitcoin. And that's part of what Bitcoin Policy Institute is opening up today, is dialogue around an important subject that we, I think, have not yet wrapped our heads around as policymakers. And I want to say thank you for the invitation today. It's why I wanted to be here. I'm going to approach this discussion from a little different lens than Michael, whose tail end of remarks I just heard. I think he did a fantastic job. A little different than the standard case you might hear for the accumulation of a Bitcoin strategic reserve or stockpile. You could define these terms differently. That's a little bit more generalizable. It's not grounded on a bullish view on Bitcoin, though I do happen to own Bitcoin and I'm bullish on Bitcoin. It doesn't have to do with even thinking about the national strategic position of the United States, as you just heard from Michael Saylor, and I agree with a lot of what he said. But it's a different vantage point altogether, grounded in the principle of capital discipline. I'll tell you what I mean.
I'm grateful to you too,
For the
Paul.
last
Thank you.
decade and a half, we have operated in an era of easy money. This isn't a controversial statement to make. We have lived in an era of money raining from on high, like the Federal Reserve, like manna coming from heaven, or sometimes, as I might have described it, showering a room full of cocaine addicts with cocaine. And what that has done is it has suspended the usual conditions of decision-making by any institution, by a federal government, by a state government, by a corporation, by a nonprofit, by a foundation. Usually these institutions operate under conditions of capital scarcity.
No, I
And
can't.
there's a complicated way of just explaining what I'm about to describe. I'm going to go with the simpler way. I have an old principle that said that if you can't explain it to a ninth grader, you probably don't understand it yourself. So we're going to go with the simple way today. Under conditions of capital scarcity, an institution has to make a choice of how it allocates its capital. Do I spend it on project A, or do I spend it on project B because my resources are finite? Perhaps that is a biotech or pharmaceutical company. It's my background as an entrepreneur before I entered the field of public life. Am I going to spend it on this particular drug for, I don't know, endometriosis, or am I going to spend it on this particular other alternative drug for the treatment of a rare genetic disease?
VP.
Perhaps
VP.
it's where you might expend your resources as an energy company. Am I going to explore for more oil and gas here, or am I going to spend more on a refinery project over here? The basic questions of capital allocation under times of scarcity. What happened over the last 15 years and the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis and the low interest rate policies that persisted for about a decade and a half is that capital effectively became free to everybody because of the policies adopted not only by the US Federal Reserve, but by central banks around the world. Under conditions of capital scarcity, you no longer have to decide between project A and B because functionally, you can just pursue both of them at the same time. Now, that led, particularly in the case of government behavior, to a level of overspending, government overspending, that created the inflation that began to kick in over the last couple of years, which instead then created a different response from the Federal Reserve and likely from other central banks around the world to raise interest rates and to exit the period of infinite capital for each of these institutions. And so what's going to happen, in the same way that we had a persistent period of infinite capital, of the absence of capital scarcity, we're now going to enter a new, and I believe even more persistent era of scarce capital once again. It's going to have a disciplining effect on every institution, from the private sector to the public. And that means that institutions, from nonprofits to companies to state governments to a federal government, are going to have to reconsider, what is my hurdle rate for a given project? What is my opportunity cost capital? Where else could I be parking this money? At what rate of return? And to compare that to the internal rate of return on a different project that I might pursue. I'm going to give you the simple version. Of this. In the simple version of the world, I would break it down into two categories of projects that a company, a nonprofit, a state government, or a national government could pursue. We'll consider areas of capital investment, and areas of high-risk capital investment. Now, of course, this two-category model is false. It's a continuously varying spectrum of risk, but for the purpose of simplicity, consider it this way. There's low risk, let's say your company. There's a low-risk project you could pursue and a high-risk project you could pursue. What ought to be your hurdle rate of return for a low-risk project as a corporation? The default is a U.S. Treasury. You can think about the default is a U.S. Treasury. You can think about the duration, 3 months, 10-year, whatever it is. Right now, 10-year U.S. Treasuries are yielding what? Somewhere between, give or take, over the course of the next year, 4 to 5%. That's your hurdle rate of return. To say that as a company, I'm sitting on a safe, functionally, we hope it is, risk-free instrument for the long run and collect 4 to 5%. So if I'm going to take on a different project internally, even a low-risk project at my company or my nonprofit or my institution, it better earn more than 4 to 5%, or else I would rather just leave it parked in the low-risk instrument. That creates, again, a hurdle rate for risk-adjusted return that we didn't have under conditions of infinite capital over the last 15 years. This is a new calculus that's really been traditionally the business decision that's back now, again in the United States. What about for your hurdle rate for a higher
Great
risk
time to be
project?
living.
That's really the question at issue. There isn't today standard for what your hurdle rate ought to be. There's a lot of mumbo jumbo in financial theory about what should be the LIBOR or the US 10-year Treasury rate plus some arbitrarily derived rate of return, plus 5%, plus 500 points or whatever it is. It's really just economic mumbo jumbo. I mean, I come from even the world in biotech investing and biotech capital allocation. People make up what the opportunity cost is for the rate of return. I believe that in the next 10 to 15 years, in the new era of scarce capital, where we are in need of institutions in need of identifying what their hurdle rate of return is going to be, for low risk projects, it is and ought to be the 10-year treasury yield. But for higher risk projects that any company or any other institution contemplates, I believe the expected long run rate of return on Bitcoin will set the hurdle rate for internal capital investment. And the reasons why are clear because they're tied to the inherent attributes of Bitcoin itself. It has a fixed supply defined by a mathematical formula. As I've often said in other contexts, God is real, math is math, and pretty much everything else is negotiable, at least subject to change over time. Think about alternative hurdles of what you might use as your rate of return, even other commodities, even gold. We could think about the supply as really being variable over a long enough time horizon, the amount of gold we might discover on planet Earth. In an era of interplanetary exploration, sounds like kooky stuff to talk about, but just think about it very pragmatically. As we eventually at least reach and eventually maybe even colonize other planets, I believe it is more likely than not that we will discover large reserves of gold, AU, on the periodic table, same as we will of other elements on other planets as well. The supply of gold, let alone even the cost of storing it, are unlikely to be fixed.
He's preaching right now.
You're not going to find Bitcoin on another planet because it's not defined by the laws of nature, which our understanding of them continues to evolve and change anyway. It's defined by the laws of math.
That's right,
Which
Paul.
our understanding of time because it is fixed in a way that's not subject to changing constraints in the natural world. So back to the question of when you think about what ought to be your hurdle rate of return for higher risk projects as a company, as a nonprofit, as a state government or a federal government, I believe we're going to see the emergence of Bitcoin in a way that we haven't in the last 10 years. Why haven't we seen it in the last 10 years? Because we haven't needed hurdle rates in the first place. We haven't needed hurdle rates for low risk projects. We haven't needed hurdle rates for higher risk projects. That is now rapidly changing. Now, against the backdrop of what I've laid out, you could ask the question of why have you limited this to be a hurdle rate of return for higher risk projects than for lower risk projects? Shouldn't Bitcoin just be the hurdle rate of return for everything, period, rather than the US Treasury? And this is where, I guess I would draw on one of my experiences. If you care about somebody, you tell them the truth. And if you care about yourself, you tell them what they want to hear. I care about this community and I consider myself part of it. I'm going to give you my perspective of the truth. And sometimes we get a little bit ahead of our skis in the Bitcoin world or the pro-Bitcoin world, in that right now we're not operating against a backdrop of where any institution really, or say for a really small number of institutions, we just heard from Michael Saylor, so I can't say no institutions, but almost no institutions have adopted or tethered any component of their hurdle rate of capital return to the Bitcoin standard. We're not going to a world where it is automatically tomorrow going to be, now that's going to be the sole rate of return that we're going to compare any other project to. 10-year treasuries are going to be the standard for assessing low risk allocations of capital.
He's right.
But I think it would be a seismic step forward, and I think it is going to be a seismic step forward to say that even though the volatility of an asset like Bitcoin is obviously much greater than that of US treasuries, so too has been the rate of return on Bitcoin over the course of the last 10 years compared to those treasuries. For the higher risk, higher return stratum of where you measure what your hurdle rate is for your rate of return on a project, I believe Bitcoin will emerge as that new standard. And if you believe that, as I do, I think that makes for probably the most compelling case for any institution, governmental to non-governmental, to for-profit to nonprofit,
He is.
holding some level of a reserve of Bitcoin. It helps to be bullish on it for the long run because you believe that asset's going to appreciate. But what it does is it tethers your institution's behavior under conditions of capital scarcity to something of fixed supply that has a fixed store of value that's likely to go up over the course of time. That is a different case for actually holding Bitcoin, even if you're a corporation. So we're talking about this at the level of the national stockpile or the national strategic reserve. But sometimes the case becomes clearer if you even look at it in the case of a company. If your company's sitting on a stockpile of cash, you're going to hold a lot of it. A lot of them do today in the form of US treasuries. Very few of them are holding those reserves in the form of Bitcoin today. I believe that is likely to change. Why do I believe it's likely to change? I believe over time, companies and institutions tend to do what they should do. And if they don't, others are going to do the same thing and outcompete them out of business. This is where I'm actually intrigued and proud of where one of the companies that I founded, called Strive, has actually played an early role in beginning to help catalyze that change. Strive was a firm I founded several years ago to push back against ESG overreach in capital markets. And what you saw in corporate America was many companies were in that realm adopting policies that were hostile to their own self-interest. Energy companies producing less oil and gas, even under times where it would have been more profitable to do so in the name of environmental mandates. And what Strive did at that time, I give this to you as backdrop for what I'm about to tell you, was vote proxies on behalf of the assets that it managed in boardrooms of these companies, affecting the behavior in these boardrooms, against those ESG policies in favor of whatever policies maximized actual overall value for that corporation. At the time we began and embarked on that project, it was unthinkable that we would be where we are today, where peak ESG is in the rearview mirror just a few years later. A lot of that private sector efficiency, closing the inefficiency gaps, they close far more quickly than you'd ever expect from the benefit of the vantage point of a rearview mirror and the benefit of retrospect. I think we're going to see the same thing with respect to the corporate stockpiling of Bitcoin. Strive actually recently became one of the few, if not only institutional asset managers, certainly one of the few, that voted in favor of a shareholder proposal at Microsoft to be able to put Bitcoin on its balance sheet. And that feels to me about as contrarian today as it did several years ago to vote against the ESG policies in the boardrooms of companies like Exxon and Chevron. And as unthinkable as it was that ESG would
You're
be
the best,
rearview mirror,
Paul.
then
Thank
how
you.
quickly we saw that change catalyzed. I think that's what we're likely to be saying a few years from now, looking at just the normalization of companies saying that obviously now in an era of no longer free capital, we have to rethink what our hurdle rates of return actually are from projects that go from low risk to high risk. And so on the front end of change, it's often hard to imagine what that change looks like. It often seems daunting, impossible, or you imagine time horizons that are measured in decades rather than years. And then in retrospect, what you realize is if that was obvious, if it was actually grounded in truth, things tend to happen far more quickly than we actually anticipate. And so the thing that we ought to debate isn't the time horizon over which it happens, but the validity of the argument of whether or not the underlying proposition is true.
Thanks, VAW.
And I think we ought to have room for reasonable debate about
You're
this.
the
Somebody
man.
might make a, what's the best possible counter argument to the view that I've shared here? I try to think about that. Otherwise, you don't really understand what you believe. One argument could be, no, we should just put it in the S&P 500. That's your opportunity cost for your rate of return. Well, if you're a company that is in the S&P 500 or aspires to be, that has a certain kind of circularity to it, right? Because you think of yourself as allocating your capital to a certain opportunity cost of return on your capital in a way that's different from and diversified from the underlying risk of the projects that you're evaluating. It doesn't quite make sense to put it in that same asset class that you yourself are comprising and a part of. At the same time, it doesn't make sure to put it in 10-year US Treasury yields. It's still being 4 to 5%. For the higher risk opportunity cost of capital that you're measuring against your internal rate of return on your project, 4 to 5% isn't going to cut it either. So I think you could take the same, try it on like a set of clothes for each of the alternative asset classes. And I think in the end, you're left with a less compelling case than you have for an asset class that is now here to stay, that has a demonstrated history now measured in decades rather than years, and has the attribute of a fixed mathematically defined supply, a characteristic that even gold doesn't share. And by the way, gold used to historically be that hurdle rate for that opportunity cost of capital for institutions holding gold in their reserves. That's why I believe that it's going to be, I can't tell you when it's going to be, whether it's going to be next month or next year. I don't think it's going to be the next decade that you begin to see private sector institutions, nonprofits and corporations included, holding their own reserves, call them stockpiles or reserves of Bitcoin in their own treasury. And I think that is going to happen even sooner than you see sovereigns actually adopting the same, both states, nations, and including our own. And the reason I say that is usually you see the sovereign behavior follow that direction in which the private sector is already headed on its own. One of the things I've learned is politicians, they tend to be followers, not leaders. I do think we have an exception right now in the White House of a guy who is a business leader that happens to be serving as the US president. So we do live in an exceptional era in the United States right now. But as a general rule of thumb, I think people in Washington, D.C., I don't mean this as a slight, it's just a pattern of how history tends to work, take their cues from the private sector.
Yes, Zach.
Funny, people even look at decisions or bold decisions that were made, like Brown versus Board of Education, 9-0 Supreme Court decision that ended segregation in our schools. The little left out fact of that, even in the narratives here in DC, is that was already, desegregation was already trending. It was already a horse that had left the barn. All the DC, in this case, not policymaker, but court came in with a unanimous decision to do was to put a stamp, its imprimatur, to finalize a trend that was already inescapably and irreversibly underway in America. I'd bring it back to the realm from civil rights and desegregation to the realm of Bitcoin and financial markets. I think we're actually going to see basically the same thing in the realm that we're here to talk about today. is that private institutions
Paul,
under
come
this
on,
condition of
man.
capital scarcity, the renewed conditions,
I
should say,
appreciate that.
the
Golly.
normalized conditions even of
I
capital
want to take all your
scarcity,
sats, man.
are going to take their cues from private sector actors that look themselves in the mirror and ask
Now I feel
themselves to be
bad.
competitive. They have to now make decisions again based on what the opportunity cost of capital is or isn't. And it will only be the natural extension of that, the natural and unavoidable consequence that nations and states follow suit in making the same kinds of decisions for themselves. So that was a bit of a technocratic or rather dry case, if I may say, for why I believe we ought to have a strategic stockpile, reserve, whatever you want to call it. These names can be used interchangeably. They have different connotations. Is not just a Bitcoin to the moon mantra, although that might be a little more arousing. And I could give you that version of it. But I think the real reason is grounded in just first principles
through,
of how
Paul.
an
Thank you.
institution ought to make decisions under conditions of capital scarcity. As we require hurdle rates
Wow. Thanks,
for
Paul.
return. And my prediction, not always right about these things, but my prediction is that you're actually going to see the private sector move more quickly in this direction, could be quite quickly in this direction, sooner than you actually see sovereigns move. But very quickly thereafter, the sovereigns will line up and follow suit in a way that
No worries,
seems
Paul.
unthinkable today,
okay.
but in retrospect, a few
I
years
just don't
from
want you to
now
have to pay
will
all those
seem
fees,
the
that's
obvious
all.
consequence of the conditions and the era that we were in, much as we saw in the evolution and
Years ago.
devolution away from ESG. I'll close. I'm going to violate a rule I usually apply in these speeches. Is the advice I give for people asking me for advice on giving an effective speech is you make one point, make it well, and then get off stage before your time is up. My time is effectively up, and I already made my 1 point, but I'm going to violate my rule anyway and just here make a second point anyhow, because I think this one is also important. In some sense, that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. And in another sense, I think it has everything to do with Bitcoin. I think we live in a moment in our national history where there is a question confronting us that we are still yet to answer decisively. It's the question of who we are as Americans. We're a disparate people spread across a vast geographic expanse, bound together by what exactly? It's a question of our time. We don't have a common religion. We don't have a common race or ethnicity. These are things that bind most nations together, a common genetic lineage, a common heritage. That's not us. Never has been, certainly isn't today. What is it that binds us together across those different, diverse attributes? I believe it is a common creed, an ethos that binds us together as Americans. It is an ethos captured in the Declaration of Independence that set the country into motion 250 years ago. It is an ethos actualized, concretized in the U.S. Constitution, which I view as the greatest operating manual for a nation in human history. But it's more than just what the words are in the Constitution or the technical operating strictures of our founding documents. It is an ethos that says that no matter who you are or where you came from or what your skin color is or where your parents came from, that you have an opportunity to be your own hero in the American landscape without any government or bureaucracy standing in your way. You could be a hero as a businessman. You could be a hero as an entrepreneur. You could be a hero as a national leader at the White House to a governor's mansion. You could also be a hero by being a cop or a police officer or a parent or a teacher or a dutiful son or daughter taking care of his elder parent in a nursing home, or somebody who just works hard for your family as a plumber and allows yourself to be the breadwinner for a family that gives your kids the American dream that's a better one than you had. That's what America is at our best. We're a nation founded on the freedom of every individual,
Oh,
no
that's
matter
fine.
what
You
your
tipped
God-given
enough.
gift is,
Don't worry about it. You
distinct
tipped
from
enough for
every
a
other person
lifetime.
in the world.
Thank you, man.
To use that unique God-given attribute to achieve the maximum of your potential in this country without a government or bureaucracy standing in your way. That, I believe, is who we are at our core. And we as human beings, we need the symbols that remind us of that from time to time. It is what I believe is in part codified in the symbology of the American flag right behind me here today. I think we live in a moment where we have lost those hero narratives, where those hero narratives for the next generation of aspiring heroes are missing. I believe that's what accounts for the growing epidemic of depression, anxiety, fentanyl, suicide. And against that backdrop, I don't want to oversell this or overbuild this up, but I think there's a role to recognize that ethos of America and the way in which that at least overlaps with the ethos of Bitcoin as well. I think Bitcoin and what it represents, more than as a financial asset, also helps fill that void, fill that hunger for a symbol, a reminder of what American greatness was all about. And I think it makes that in the national context an even more fitting asset to fill our national stockpiles and national strategic reserves with something that not only most importantly has the financial attributes that I laid out earlier, but even more importantly for the long run, also in a moment where we lack the symbols of reminding ourselves and our next future generations
I didn't
of who
see
we
'em.
are, helps to fill that
Let me look
void
again. Let me
by
see.
embracing capitalism rather than apologizing for it, by embracing success rather than victimhood. We're victors, not victims. That's who we are. And as much as I believe that's the American creed, that'd be the creed that I would like to see embodied in the future of Bitcoin. And I'll close with this, also the policies that are set surrounding not only the future of Bitcoin, but more generally, the future of crypto policy in America. I don't want to see us fall into a trap where we make the very mistakes in regulating and constraining and use crony capitalism to weed out and eliminate competitors. That's what you see in other industries. That's what you see through all of the course of human history and its interface between business and government. I think what makes the future of Bitcoin, and I'm not going to conflate them, but more broadly, the future of crypto policy interesting and important is that if the ethos of Bitcoin and the ethos of the character of the asset class we're talking about today is distinct and embodies the American spirit, then I want to make sure that we here in America don't adopt some of the same cronyist or market limiting or competition limiting forces that have tempted us in other regulated industries to use our future policy framework in the future of Bitcoin and crypto policy more generally to embrace those principles of freedom and competition without apology. And I offer that both as hopefully a note as well as a note of caution as we enter what I believe is a new golden age, not just for America, but a new golden age for innovation in America. And I do believe that Bitcoin will be a critical and important part of it. Thank you for having me today, guys. God bless you and our great country. And come visit Ohio. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Love it. I love Vivek. I like how he put it together. Let's see what this guy's saying.
Few quick announcements. One, I noticed there's a number of people standing in the back. There are plenty of open seats here on the front row.
Yeah, what a speech. Paul, thank you. Yeah, man. Yeah, Paul. You don't have to tip every time you get here, man. Don't worry about that. You tipped enough for a lifetime, brother. Seriously, don't worry about that. Yeah, Vivek. I love Vivek, man. I love Vivek. But Paul, yeah, what you were saying about the because sometimes we seem crazy because we're all by ourselves, but this is great, man. We're the pioneers. You know what I mean? We're the pioneers. And absolutely, VAW. He's going to be president one day. I really believe that. I don't think he's going to run in 2028. I don't think that's the right time because him and JD are real good friends, and I think he's going to let JD do it. Hopefully, he lets Vivek be his vice president. So this is exciting, guys. This is exciting. Hell of a timeline right now.
And there they are, the king of stable coins and the CEO of Strike.
For having us. As David mentioned, I'm Jack. I'm the CEO of Strike, and I'm joined by the one and only Paulo, CEO of Tether and CTO of Bitfinex. How are you, my friend?
I'm great. Thank you very much, Jack. And I'm very grateful to be here. This is my first time in America. So I'm very thrilled to be here.
First react. How do you like our seed oils? A little red 40? Kidding.
I love Jack.
I think we need to give our nation's capital a little context on your business.
Sure.
I know everyone sees the profits and the profits per employee, very impressive, but some of the numbers I run up myself, 400 million wallets, so 400 million users, you're adding 30 million users a quarter, which for simpler math, that's 10 million a month. Simpler math, that's over 250,000 a day. Who are you selling your product to? And what product are you selling that's reached? I mean, these are numbers that would make a social network like Twitter and X blush. And you're selling a financial service. Who is using this product and what product exactly has reached such widespread product market fit?
Right. Yeah. So
Nice.
Everyone talks about stable coins with the
I'm going to
US
fast
Act,
forward this
right?
part,
So in
guys.
the US, you would use stable
Because
coins.
we don't really give a shit about stable coins. Yeah, Jack Mallers is the man for sure. Tell us more about that. How'd you get the free sets, Zach? Yeah, VAW. Yeah, I love his app too. I love Strike.
I started to think about Bitcoin in the nuclear war, pandemic.
You know what, guys? I wouldn't mind going up there and talking one day. Maybe in like 10 years when I get to be a little veteran, I can go up there and talk in front of people about Bitcoin. Because I think I want to be I want to travel the world and teach people about Bitcoin. You know, that's why I work so hard learning about it. That'd be a cool job.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. I think we've got some really interesting panels coming up later this morning and some really interesting and exciting announcements from some congressmen. So I stand in between you and those really exciting events, but hopefully I'll make this titillating. So by way of brief introduction, Matthew Pines, I'm the new executive director of the Bitcoin Policy Institute. I have an interesting career. I studied physics and philosophy undergrad, became a consultant for the US government for about 15 years, really helping the government think through kind of what if scenarios, mostly really bad scenarios. Things like nuclear war, pandemics, cyber attacks. So the worst case scenarios that the government has to look around and develop.
Thanks, VAW. I appreciate it.
About 5-6 years ago, I started to think about Bitcoin in that lens. What is the long-term strategic implication for the US government if Bitcoin were to continue to monetize, say to reach some meaningful fraction of gold or even surpass gold? And I looked around at that time, I realized this wasn't a question that anyone was even thinking to ask, let alone attempt to answer. So I wrote the first white paper for the Bitcoin Policy Institute, which hopefully helped jumpstart this really impressive organization that I've been proud to help lead now and over the past month. And really kind of a fortuitous moment here. So I see this as kind of me trying to catch the football that I threw to myself about 5 years ago. So the topic of my talk this afternoon, which is going to be kind of a run through of geopolitics and geoeconomics and Bitcoin. Hopefully it doesn't go too down into the weeds, but I want to try to get some of the abstract discussions we've had this morning, which are really about painting a picture of the future and the vision of Bitcoin in America, and to start thinking about the practical context in a pretty radically changing world. Highlight what I think.
You remember Changing World Order? He's probably doing a play on that. Sorry, guys, I'm a nerd. I love stuff like this. Thanks. I don't know how to say your name. Mitch? Is it Mike? M-I-C-H Baker? How do you say that? Thank you. I appreciate that. I had no idea what I was going to talk about either with that video. Thank you, VAW, for watching my old videos and having them and stuff. Okay, man. I'm about to run, Jerry, bro. You know I like to try and stick my head. I appreciate that, man. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna watch this. Probably watch this whole thing. I should be working, but I'm a nerd. I love changing world order. I love geopolitics, politics, Bitcoin. This is all my my wheelhouse right here. So, and these are some big announcements. They're getting ready to make some big announcements here. So, thanks for stopping by, man. I appreciate it.
I think are an honest look at the challenges that the U.S. faces in the geopolitical and geoeconomic sphere, highlight where I think challengers are coming from our rivals, and where Bitcoin is poised to play a significant role. So a quote from an important movie, "The days move along with regularity, one day indistinguishable from the next, a long continuous chain. Then suddenly there is a change." We saw that change happen last Thursday, and it was foot stomped by the crypto summit on Friday. And hopefully, I think today will act as a catalyst to push this even further. There's a particular quote in that executive order that I knew drew my attention, I'm sure drew the attention of national leaders and policymakers around the world, which was, because there's a fixed supply of Bitcoin, there is a strategic advantage to being among the first nations to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Kind of a remarkable statement for the President of the United States to put in an official executive order. I think the question we have to ask is why? Why is that the case? So a really simple scheme that I think about when I think about the geoeconomic system, the relationship between the global economy and geopolitics, essentially, is this three-legged stool that has underpinned the global order that we all grew up in, that has determined the course of our professional lives and the lives of our national leadership, is this relationship between the G7 countries, which provide the dominant source of credit and capital in the global system, intersecting with raw materials coming out of mostly OPEC countries, right? The core energy commodities that fuel the global system, and the sort of goods and manufacturing sector, which has been dominated increasingly so by China. And when those sort of three parts of the global order were in sort of frenemy mode, agreed to cooperate in a global order, you had relatively
smooth sailing when it comes to the basic structure of the global system. I think we've seen since COVID and then accelerated after the Ukraine war, each element of that system come under acute stress. So we've seen increasing more overt sanctions and sabotage, political warfare, economic and financial warfare, stress relationship between the G7 countries and Russia, a critical member of OPEC+. And then you've seen as China has emerged as a major rival to the US, increasing tensions, sort of sub-threshold and influence in cyber operations, and then a response by the US to de-risk, impose export controls, et cetera. Meanwhile, the relationship between China and OPEC+ countries, in the Gulf in particular, has really flourished. And the establishment of more like technical facilities and financing programs like the Belt and Road Initiative, the Digital Silk Road, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Global Development Initiative, Chinese yuan-denominated swaps, cross-border interbank payment systems from China, the BRICS Bridge, gold, oil in Shanghai. These are all sort of geoeconomic developments that have accelerated in the past few years. We've seen an implication of all these changes on the markets, right? The markets aren't just driven by sort of earnings expectations. They're driven by these structural changes: reshoring, realigning, rearming, and rewiring. And now national security and fiscal dominance tend to override market forces. We also face an environment that the incoming administration is of structural imbalances in the global system, rising debt and competition, straining relations. As a result, the US, in particular, sovereign bond market, is increasingly fragile and has managed. And so this is the context in which we need to think about the US's geoeconomic strength or fragility. The debt market has become fragile as a result of just the sheer scale of the issuance that has started to outpace the ability of the traditional institutions to sort of intermediate that debt issuance. And we've seen examples of this result in acute crises that the Fed has to come in and bail things out. So things look stable, then they break, and then pretty soon you've got trillions of dollars of QE. Another effect of that increasing debt issuance is it's squeezing out critical fiscal space to support our strategic requirements. In particular, we're now paying more on our interest payments than on the defense budget, a thing that the Defense Department is acutely aware of. This is now generating increasing sense of national security risk. We no longer have the defense industrial base to keep up with the demands of strategic competition. We're aggressively trying to reshore and build out those capabilities, but the timelines to establish those production lines and actually produce the sheer quantity of the munitions to credibly deter China is an acute challenge. Meanwhile, China is continuing to press their strategy forward to dominate global industrial production, climb value chains. And so they've gone from about 6% in 2000, and they're targeted to get roughly half of global industrial production by the end of the decade. Not just an industrial strategy, they're also trying to export their model of digital authoritarianism that's based off of their tech stack and their ideology. This is seen through the distribution of subsea telecommunications cables, but you can also look at maps of exports of Huawei, ZTE, Hikvision, the penetration of Alipay, the now increasing proliferation of really advanced AI models coming out of China. This is a digital competition that has a physical substrate, but is all about dominating and ensnaring the global South and increasingly parts of the West into a geoeconomic and technical network that is ultimately determined and owes allegiance to China and China's model of digital governance. In the monetary sphere, which is the connection to Bitcoin, they have a determined strategy.
Thank you.
They recognize they're not going to be able to completely replace the hierarchical correspondent banking network that the US built over many decades after the 50s, but they don't really have to. They can use digital technologies to create more efficient, sort of cross-bridge, central bank to central bank CBDC systems that provide, to first order, a resilience against being sanctioned, because now they can settle most of their trade with their partners in the Middle East and Asia. And they can link increasingly more nodes in the global economic network to them. And they can use systems like Ember in particular to make themselves more resilient to sanctions and also to build their influence over time. So the BIS incubated this China-backed project. It was quite successful in that pilot stage, and it was only when it was basically already done did the US realize what was happening and then decided to try to kill it. But at that point, it was already implemented. And now, of course, Trump has tried to sanction BRICS countries if they attempt to establish a new currency. Now, the Ukraine war marked a phase shift in another key dimension of the structure of the global system, where the treasury security, which has functioned as a global reserve asset for the past 50 plus years, is increasingly being substituted for gold, especially by central banks, which are accumulating gold on a structural basis for the past 10 years. And that has only accelerated in the past 6 months. Now, where does Bitcoin fit in? US government last week recognized Bitcoin as digital gold for its unique properties. It's scarce, it's liquid, it's decentralized, it's portable, it's fungible, it's verifiable, it's censorship resistant, and it's natively digital. So it has all the aspects of regular gold, but for the 21st century. And we've seen hints, although it's still emerging as a speculative emerging reserve asset, it has responded in many ways as a safe haven in some circumstances, like the 2023 SVB bank failures and the response to the 2022 Ukraine invasion. So it's showing some hints where it trades risk-off assets, some where it trades as a risk-on asset, but as it continues to monetize, these portfolios are thinking about Bitcoin as digital gold. This is translating to changing perceptions by global investors and policymakers about how Bitcoin fits in to their portfolios as major capital managers, but also sovereign funds and national reserves. Larry Fink, just a few months ago, was on stage talking about his conversations with sovereign wealth fund managers. And the conversation wasn't, should we buy Bitcoin or not? It was, what should the allocation be? 2%, 5%? And Larry Fink, who's usually quite cautious with his words, said, if everybody had that conversation, it would be $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 Bitcoin, where it would become, start to rise, meaningfully close to gold. So this is the context in the changing world system that I think we need to think about last Thursday's executive order. That landed on the desk of every major president, central bank, and finance minister in the world. There is now discussions happening, taskers going out through those different bureaucracies about how to interpret that. What does that mean for their own country's relationship to Bitcoin? And governments don't move too fast, but when they do, they move in size, they move in scale, and they can deploy trillions of dollars of capital, and they can have geopolitical effects. And I think we could be at this inflection moment where the geopolitical aspects of Bitcoin start to become extremely important and could shape the next several years of Bitcoin's future. It seems clear that the Bitcoin race is now on, and the ball is in our court to maintain our advantage. Thank you.
Good speech.
Now, it's my great pleasure to bring to the stage Congressman Begich, who is here to make a very exciting announcement from Alaska.
I love this guy. He's a congressman from Alaska.
Tell you, I've followed you on Twitter for years, and it's an honor to follow you today. Well, thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here today, the Bitcoin for America conference, among so many forward-thinking individuals who understand the critical role Bitcoin will play in the future of our financial system. I want to recognize the important work this institute has done in fostering research, discussion, and policy innovation in the digital space. Today, I'm here to make a historic announcement, one that will shape America's economic future for generations to come. Today, I will be introducing the Bitcoin Act of 2025 in the United States House. Now, this is a bold and forward-looking legislative initiative designed to ensure the United States secures its financial independence and maintains its leadership in the global digital economy. Before I continue, I want to take a moment and recognize the tireless efforts of my colleague in the Senate, Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming.
Woman's a legend.
Senator Lummis has long been a champion of Bitcoin and financial innovation, bringing the Bitcoin discussion to Capitol Hill in ways that have shaped the national conversation on digital assets. Her vision for a strategic Bitcoin reserve as a tool to bolster America's balance sheet and secure our economic future has been instrumental in advancing this discussion. Senator Lummis, I thank you for your leadership and unwavering dedication to securing America's financial future. I'm proud to announce as well, as we introduce this bill, I will have 6 co-sponsors in the United States House as original co-sponsors, and I want to give them a shout out now. Representatives Addison McDowell, Pat Harrigan, Michael Ruley, Troy Nels, Dave Taylor, and Mike Collins, all on board with this bill. So why Bitcoin? People in this room know better than anyone. Bitcoin represents more than just a digital asset. It's a cornerstone of financial sovereignty, economic resilience, and innovation.
Paul. You're a legend, brother.
We're witnessing an unprecedented shift in the global financial landscape. Bitcoin has emerged as the world's first truly decentralized asset, a modern form of digital gold. With a fixed supply of 21 million coins, Bitcoin is not subject to inflationary manipulation, making it one of the most reliable stores of value in human history. Over the past decade, Bitcoin has outperformed every major asset class. In contrast, gold has grown nominally each year. Bitcoin is a strategic asset. It represents financial sovereignty, a hedge against financial instability, and a tool for reinforcing America's global economic strength. Last week, President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve and a U.S. digital asset stockpile, reinforcing America's leadership in financial innovation. This executive order positions the United States at the forefront of digital revolution and paves the way for the golden age of digital currency in the United States. President Trump understands the growing importance of digital assets in our national sovereignty. This executive order corrects a fundamental issue: previous disjointed management of government-held digital assets, which led to premature sales costing American taxpayers over $17 billion. The Bitcoin Act is the legislative solution to President Trump's vision, solidifying and expanding upon his executive order. By codifying the strategic Bitcoin reserve into law, we ensure that future administrations cannot reverse course on this crucial financial strategy. Mr. President, we are delivering on your promise to make America the global leader in cryptocurrency. The Bitcoin Act establishes a strategic Bitcoin reserve, a federal initiative to ensure the United States holds a significant stake in the world's most important decentralized financial network. This bill recognizes Bitcoin's potential to complement our gold reserves, fortify our national security, and provide economic stability in an increasingly volatile financial world. Our gold reserves stand at approximately 8,133 metric tons, valued at over $750 billion. The United States has long relied on gold as a financial backstop, but it is time to look ahead. By phasing in the acquisition of 1 million Bitcoin, approximately 5% of Bitcoin's total supply over 5 years, we will ensure that America remains a dominant player in the digital financial era. This initiative is designed to be fiscally responsible. Not a single taxpayer dollar will be used. Instead, we will leverage Federal Reserve remittances, which exceeded $76 billion in 2023, gold certificate revaluations, unlocking additional funds to finance Bitcoin purchases, and the Exchange Stabilization Fund, a fund with the mandate to manage currencies outside of the United States dollar. Bitcoin is open, it is censorship resistant, it is immune to geopolitical manipulation, and it embodies the principles of economic freedom, innovation, and self-determination that define America's leadership. I want to be very clear about one thing. The Bitcoin Act does not infringe on private ownership of Bitcoin. It explicitly protects the rights of individuals and businesses to own, hold, and transact Bitcoin freely. It recognizes self-custody as a fundamental right of financial sovereignty. This bill affirms that Americans should never fear government overreach when it comes to Bitcoin. We have built safeguards into the Bitcoin Act to ensure transparency and accountability. A proof of reserve system that will provide public, verifiable audits of all government-held Bitcoin. The Comptroller General will oversee all Bitcoin purchases and storage to ensure full transparency, and a 20-year holding period that will prevent politically motivated selling of our reserves, ensuring long-term national security. The Bitcoin Act of 2025 is a commitment to securing America's economic future. It ensures that we will lead the digital financial revolution rather than fall behind. It diversifies our national reserves, strengthens our national balance sheet, and enhances our geopolitical standing, all while affirming the fundamental financial freedoms of every American. As other nations seek alternatives to the US dollar, America must take decisive action to secure our place in the digital future. The Bitcoin Act is that action. I invite my colleagues in Congress to stand with me in enacting this legislation to ensure that the United States remains the global leader in financial innovation and economic security. America was built with bold vision, was built by bold people, and it's time for America to be bold again. Thank you.
Fire speech. Oh, you guys hear that? The Bitcoin Act. This is the one Cynthia Lummis was talking about at the Bitcoin conference, where we're going to acquire 200,000 Bitcoin every year.
My name is Zach Shapiro. I'm the head of policy at BPI and going to speak briefly about the state efforts to create Bitcoin reserves. So, across the United States, we're witnessing an unprecedented wave of interest in Bitcoin among state legislatures. In the past year alone, 32 bills have been introduced across 24 states to explore or enact investment in Bitcoin. Of these, 28 have received committee hearings and 7 have advanced to legislative floors. This state-level momentum has now been matched by federal action. Last week's executive order establishing a strategic Bitcoin reserve marks a watershed moment in US monetary policy. Serious policy discussions have replaced reflective skepticism, marking a dramatic shift in the Overton window for public investment in Bitcoin. And while the federal government has now taken a bold step forward, states remain crucial laboratories of democracy with an opportunity to pioneer complementary approaches that will work in concert with the federal initiative. Let us be direct about what's happening here. A brand new digital monetary commodity, the first of its kind, is being birthed into existence right before our eyes.
This is not just another asset class. It's perhaps a once in a civilization opportunity to redefine what money is and how this tool can best serve humanity. Bitcoin's core appeal is simple but powerful. Absolute, credible digital scarcity. Its fixed supply cap, secured through decentralization, cryptography, and game theory, uniquely positions it as a reliable hedge against monetary debasement. This characteristic, now recognized in an executive order of the President of the United States, makes Bitcoin particularly valuable for state legislatures and for state treasuries. Unlike the federal government, states cannot print money and cannot run perpetual deficits. They must vigilantly protect their reserves' purchasing power against inflation, which inevitably strains budgets, forcing difficult decisions about spending, taxation, and priorities. Over the past decade, Bitcoin has outperformed every traditional asset class, including stocks, bonds, real estate, and precious metals. This performance persisted through multiple market cycles, demonstrating Bitcoin's resilience and growing institutional adoption. For states with long-term obligations like pension plans, pension funds, and infrastructure projects, Bitcoin represents not merely a defensive position against inflation, but a strategic opportunity to grow reserves in real terms. And as you can see from the quotes behind me, drawn directly from this text of the state bills, the suitability of Bitcoin for this purpose has not gone unnoticed. So that's the good news about state-level adoption of Bitcoin. Yet the sobering reality is that the substance of most of these state-level proposals fail to adequately meet the moment. None would.
Corey, real quick, you missed the announcement. They're trying to pass a Bitcoin Act in Congress where they're going to declare buying, I think it's 200,000 Bitcoin a year for the next 5 years and hold it for 20 years. So, and this guy right here, he's talking about buying Bitcoin on the state. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Would trigger Bitcoin purchases upon enactment. Most merely propose feasibility studies or authorize potential future investments. Proposals, only 9 specifically mention reserves comprised of Bitcoin as opposed to other cryptocurrencies or asset classes. The efforts to shepherd these bills across the finish lines has also been somewhat lackluster. We've seen promising legislation gutted at the 11th hour, as last week Utah's House Bill 230, which had advanced further than any other of these bills, had its strategic reserve protections stripped out entirely. Too many legislators and boosters are approaching state reserves merely as symbolic gestures as opposed to strategic imperatives. But now is not the time for such timidity. When a state explores holding Bitcoin on behalf of its citizens, it is not chasing the latest trend, it is safeguarding its financial future from forces beyond its control. Given these stakes, states cannot afford half measures. They need thoughtfully crafted laws that enable responsible implementation of Bitcoin reserves, addressing custody solutions, risk management strategies, and clear mandates to maximize long-term value. In the realm of policy, the challenge before us is to move from conceptual support to practical implementation. This requires addressing several critical questions. How should states approach dollar cost averaging into Bitcoin positions? What custody solutions offer the optimal balance between security and accessibility? What governance structures best insulate Bitcoin reserves from short-term political pressures while maintaining democratic accountability? And what can states do to coordinate their approaches not only with each other, but with the Federal Strategic Bitcoin Reserve to create network effects and shared best practices? In the realm of politics, our greatest challenge isn't merely persuading legislatures to support Bitcoin reserves, but ensuring that they genuinely comprehend Bitcoin's fundamental value as digital monetary infrastructure rather than simply following constituent-pleasing trends. This requires a deep educational effort that transcends partisanship, equipping lawmakers with both the technical understanding and the historical monetary context to seize this unprecedented opportunity to strengthen their state's fiscal sovereignty and position their communities at the forefront of a global revolution that will serve as a financial lifeboat among rising global debt, persistent money printing, and the growing storm of monetary uncertainty and instability. So today, I'm announcing that BPI is developing an open source model legislation framework for state-level Bitcoin reserves to be unveiled at our summit in June. We're creating a comprehensive blueprint that states can adapt to their specific legal and budgetary needs, drawing from Senator Lummis's Bitcoin Act and incorporating the best from the existing state proposals. Our model legislation will detail clear pathways for purchasing Bitcoin, outline rigorous custody protocols, and propose effective oversight measures. Our goal is to transform Bitcoin reserves from theory into practical, secure, and valuable assets for states. But we can't and shouldn't do this alone. We invite all of you here today, policymakers, industry leaders, and informed citizens, to add your voice and shape and then shepherd legislation that is both ambitious and practical. Our collective responsibility is to craft policies that genuinely meet this historic moment, and BPI stands ready as a resource, a partner, and a forum for this essential work. As promising as recent developments at both the state and federal levels are, our work has just begun. We must elevate the standard of legislative drafting, allowing states to adapt Bitcoin reserves effectively, transparently, and prudently. Crucially, we must coordinate these state-level efforts with federal initiatives like the Bitcoin Act, creating an integrated approach to the stewardship of public Bitcoin reserves that will serve generations to come. The window of opportunity before us is historic but not indefinite. Early adopting states will likely capture disproportionate benefits even as the federal government begins building its own reserves. And more importantly, developing robust models for Bitcoin reserve management now will establish precedents that shape public policy for decades. Let us approach this responsibility with the vision and the diligence that it deserves. Thank you. And now it is my absolute privilege to introduce Congressman, one of the most steadfast supporters of Bitcoin, certainly in the Democratic Party.
Wow. So, yeah, we're behind, Damon. Everybody, welcome Corey to the chat. Corey's from Got Sats YouTube channel. He's got a great YouTube channel. Make sure you guys go over there, click on his name, and then subscribe to him. He makes a video every single day. He's a great guy, man. He'll be on 60 Minutes in a few years. I told him that. But yeah, so we're buying at the federal level. We're gonna try to. We're gonna try to pass this bill through, get it through Congress, and then up to the Senate, and then to the president's desk. And then this guy's got a plan for states to buy Bitcoin. And I think what I'm gonna start doing, guys. I'm not saying I'm gonna get into politics. I'm thinking about it. Got to go, Jerry. About to drive home. Okay, but I'll rewatch it when I get home. Thanks for covering this. Sounds interesting. Yes, thanks for stopping by, Corey. I want to be part of, because Nevada, even though we won Nevada as a red state, we're still kind of a blue state. So I want to do everything I can to make sure that we get a Bitcoin or strategic Bitcoin reserve here in Nevada. I got to see what I can try to do my little part. So thanks for stopping by, Corey. But yeah, do you guys want me to keep going? Because we're almost at 2 hours here. Or what? It's only about 6 or 7 people in here now. I think I'm gonna get out here and go to work for a little bit. You guys got any questions for me? Exciting stuff, man. Paul, Damon, Mike, I think your name is MICH. All right, guys. I think I'm going to end the live stream. I appreciate you guys stopping by. This is big. I had another video planned. I'll probably do it tomorrow if nothing big happens tomorrow. But this is great, man. The Bitcoin Act. We already knew this was coming, but we really know now. And I'm going to deep dive into it. I'm going to read some stuff about it tonight and do some research on it. But yeah. So let me know what you guys think. If you guys want to go into the comment section. In the comment section below. Thank you guys so much for stopping by. I appreciate it. Paul, thank you again so much for the great donation. I really appreciate you, Paul. And thank you guys so much for stopping by and being here and supporting me, even though there's not a lot of people here and stuff like that. But I'd rather have quality than quantity, and you guys are definitely quality. And speaking of quality, we got to save in the best money in the world, and this is what adoption looks like. With the nation states on the federal and the state level, and they're getting on board what we already knew. And if you've been on this channel for a while, I'm pretty sure you guys already know what that is. It's the best way to save. And for me, the only way to save. And that's Bitcoin. I love each and every one of you, and I'll talk to you soon. Thank you guys so much for being here with me. Love you guys. Peace and love, guys.